Coming to you from the Windy City. Welcome to Let's Talk Shop, a podcast about all things cloud and enterprise tech. Listen to insights and guest interviews with IT thought leaders and professionals. Now, here's your host, Elias Khnaser.
It is my great pleasure today to have a really special guest on the podcast. He's someone that used to give us, the drink from the fire hose when I used to be at Gartner, one of the sharpest people I know. He is currently the corporate vice president for Microsoft Cloud for Industry and Global Expansion. It is really awesome to have Corey Sanders on the show today. Corey, it's great to have you.
It's great to be here, Eli. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. This is going to be a lot of fun. So before we get into the meat of things, dude, what happened to Tuesdays with Corey?
It slipped away. It slipped away. No, I was doing it pretty aggressively in two roles ago. And was pretty passionate about it. And then I moved over to the sort of the go-to-market sales, customer enablement side. And I felt like I had less interesting things to share, and my viewers agreed. And so, so I've ended up basically putting it on ice a little bit. But we're talking about whether we do something again. So, let's see. People can give me feedback if they prefer not.
Well, this episode is going to be released on Tuesday.
This will be the inaugural new Tuesdays with Corey. So I'm happy for that. Absolutely.
That's awesome. So speaking of roles, I mean, you went from running everything at Azure infrastructure to sales, and now you're doing industry solutions. I'm curious, why?
What happened? Well, at each job I was in, they asked me to leave, and so here I am now. No, just kidding.
That explains things.
That explains things, right? Like people are always like, "Oh, why did you make that choice?" I was like, "It wasn't a choice." No. So 17 years at Microsoft. Started as an intern, actually, as a developer, and in Windows, and then moved on to, as you said, sort of the Azure infrastructure. Did that for about 10 years. So like the original sort of deployment of VMs and containers, the original engagement with Docker and Red Hat and all those, I got to be sort of on the front line of some of those things, which was just an awesome experience to build that out. And then I got really excited over sort of how do I help customers deliver and deploy their solutions, right? Sort of this shift on like, how do I think we've got a great product. How do I enable more customers to use it, right? And that includes both helping our customers, but also helping the people who are talking to customers, whether sales or technical folks, making sure sort of we're ready to have the conversations. We can talk deeply about the platform. And so that's, I did that for about 3 years, like you said, in sales and sort of customer enablement, as I like to call it, sort of figuring out how to help customers. And now back in the engineering side, one of the things I sort of learned in my sales role was the opportunity to actually build solutions focused on very industry-specific requirements and needs was really pretty exciting. And so I moved back over to engineering to really focus on the building of those capabilities. And I really did miss sort of that building component of the job. And so here I am and getting going. Just recently moved. So still a little bit early in role, but excited to be here.
Okay, cool. So for our listeners and our viewers that don't know what this means, so tell me a little bit of what does it mean, Microsoft Azure for Industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the at a very basic level, as we continue to advance with our cloud services and our products, whether it be our infrastructure, our data, all the way up to sort of our Dynamics and Teams products, the sort of realization is, but frankly, our customers pushing us that they require sort of more complete end-to-end solutions, right? That are focused on solving real industry problems and challenges, right? Sort of real business challenges. And so as we kind of looked at that set of problems, we started saying, well, how do we go make our platforms better and easier to use with that specificity in mind? How do we make our data platform easier to use for health companies? How do we make our Teams platform easier to use for financial services in supporting their end customers in, let's say, a retail bank? And so, these types of questions, they're still all based on our horizontal platforms, as I call them. They're still sort of all innovating based based on that sort of starting point, but adding unique, innovative, industry-specific capabilities on top is sort of where my team works. It also includes a significant component of partnering very deeply with ISVs. One of the most important things I joke about with my team is that from an industry perspective at Microsoft, the most important thing is to have is humility. We cannot solve all of our industry customers' problems, right? We need to be partnering and we need to be solving these problems together with leaders in this industry, many of which have been there decades, right? I mean, some of these ISVs have been building solutions supporting customers, whether health, financial services, energy, et cetera, for decades, right? And like I said, I've been enrolled for 6 months. And so, we really need to make sure that we're working deeply and closely with those partners when we're building these solutions. And so that's kind of another big element of that industry job, is bringing the partner solutions with our horizontal solutions and adding sort of unique, innovative, industry-focused IP on top to bring it all together. Sounds simple. I said quick answer, and then it turned into like the longest answer ever. So I apologize, Eli, for that.
No. This is great. So do you feel like this is also the answer to, some of the customers, we've heard it a lot from customers, and this is across the board. This is not Microsoft specific. It applies to all the cloud providers, that, hey, there's too many services. There's too many features. There's too many things going on that, every ignite or build, you're throwing all of these newer things at me and it's just too much to absorb. Is this a way to sort of package it so that it is more easily digestible and focusing customers on, hey, if you're in retail, these are the solutions that we are recommending for you?
Absolutely. The way that we approach the starting point for our industry conversation is our industry prioritized scenarios. And we have, for each one of our industries, we have sort of this wheel that we all look at, which is basically the set of scenarios that need to be solved. And they are scenarios in terms of the industry, right? They're not scenarios in terms of Microsoft or technology, right? Simple things like knowing your customer better, which turns out to actually be a problem that every single industry has, but the problem is different by industry. And so basically taking those types of scenarios and then driving both the set of our services that can help deliver on those problems, making sure we've got the glue to make it super easy to deploy and think about it, sample architectures to help customers sort of visualize how the pieces will come together. And then, like I said, actually going the next step and saying, now, what are the partners and the partner solutions that are going to be built on top, and working closely with our services partners to be able to go customize and deliver it customer by customer. And so it absolutely is that sort of this pivot. And if you go to sort of any of our Microsoft Cloud for Industry websites, you'll see the pivot is very strongly the problems, not the product, right? And I think it's a really exciting shift for us as we look at sort of, again, to your point, like, I don't want alphabet soup of sort of interesting, cool cloud solutions, right? I know Kubernetes is exciting, but tell me, how does Kubernetes help me engage with my end customer and get them to use our wealth management products more effectively, right? Like, that's the question we need to understand and solve, and that's the work that my team does pretty actively.
So I want to ask you about partners, but one more question on this. So how will this be operationalized? Will customers be able to sign up to industry-specific solutions like self-service and get access to these blueprints, these architectures, and they can do it themselves? Or is this going to be more of a consulting engagement with partners, or are you going to offer both? Like, how do you operationalize it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think we're gonna, as part of my team, we are going to build out some sort of full service capabilities, right? That can be deployed and leveraged. But if you look at sort of the many of the current Microsoft Cloud for industry solutions, right? If you go to the retail page as an example, the components there are a lot of sort of these either this glue, this connector glue, right, to be able to put these components together in an easy way, AI models to get going quickly with sort of the leveraging of the AI services, data models to be able to create some consistency in how the data model will work across partner and customer, and then sort of that integration left to right are sort of all part of a purchased product, sort of in some ways a supporting SKU that allows you to go take advantage of our services in this way. And so, that is kind of how we put it together. It will vary based on industry. And that's going to be a really important point, because we also, in some places, also bring sort of support capabilities to bear. And we also bring sort of resources to help you architect in some scenarios as well. And so it will vary based on the industry, based on the scenarios that we prioritize. But I think the full range of fully finished services that are industry focused and specific, to sort of connectors that are enabled and supported that sort of enhance our existing horizontal capabilities, all the way to the services support either with us or with partners to deliver the sort of the last mile, as it were, and put it into the customer's environment.
Okay, so then what type of customers are you working with, and what types, who are, maybe, I don't know if you can name the partners, but what kinds of partners are you working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So like there's quite a few that I can name, but I'll use maybe a couple examples that I think are really exciting, and they are public from a partner's perspective. One of my favorites that I actually reference a lot is Teladoc. And that partly because of sort of this this pandemic climate has forever changed people's expectations on how they engage with their doctors, which I think is great, right? I think that this sort of long over are the days where to have any doctor conversation, you have to go to their office, right? I think that the sort of ability for doctors to engage with their patients in a remote way, it allows them to get more done, have faster conversations, sort of take questions, et cetera. And Teladoc's a leader, right, in this sort of with Health Solo. They are a leader in sort of engaging with sort of patients via the doctors, and so they have built that solution with Microsoft Teams. And so it's a great example of where our sort of services and our expertise, which is offering telecommunication services, offering these sort of collaboration experiences that we've been sort of working on for years. Our ability to sort of enable a very industry-specific solution using this partner that is the leader in that space when it comes to that type of communication. So they don't have to go build a Teams-like platform. They can focus on the things that they're the expert on,
right?
And we just make sure Teams works beautifully for them, and then don't go focus on the things that they're great at, right? Which is not things necessarily that we have as much expertise. And so, I can go through these examples. dunnhumby shop on the retail side with sort of giving retailers much more access to sort of brand information. Mortgage 365 on the banking side to offer sort of insights on lending and borrowing. Like all of these are great kind of partner solutions that we work pretty closely with to enable services and solutions, leveraging our horizontal capabilities.
Super cool. What about partners?
Those are partners. Sorry, customers. I answered the partners question first, Eli. I apologize. I went reverse. Okay. Customers wise, yeah, and it sounded like those were customers because of the work.
Well, so let me ask you. Sorry to interrupt. So let me ask you then. So what you guys have learned with Teladoc is the idea. Then you're going to bring these best practices to help other doctors digitally transform what they're doing. Is that the point behind it?
Well, yeah, and that's actually what Teladoc's doing, right? Like, I think Teladoc is out there basically saying, look, like the doctors can leverage their experience and get better engagement, faster response times, right? And frankly, get better reach with their services by using the Teladoc products. And so, the partnership there is really exciting to me because it means Teladoc, the expert in that area, right, can go push that, and we basically go and make sure that the underlying services that they're using to enable that allow them to go to those doctors with success.
Very cool.
Now, there's also additional opportunities as you look at some of things like, okay, now what about the data story? What about the other components of that platform, right? Obviously, there's other places where either hospitals or doctors could leverage services surrounding that, but that sort of integration point really enables us to reach the right end customer in the right way. Now, let me talk customers, since you asked that question. Yeah. I mean, I think when you look at sort of the customers in this and some maybe different examples, and I spent a lot of time talking about health because it's been out for the longest. Sure. But St. Luke's is probably a good example of a customer, when they were sort of responding to the demands of the initial demands of COVID-19. They basically built out an improved call center. right? Sort of the goal being, again, an omni-channel experience to service their customers. And so they built out this call center, and they leveraged capabilities that we built in Patient 360, right? And this is basic capabilities that are built on top of Dynamics 360. But focused on, again, the industry efforts behind it. So very focused on sort of the types of data and types of components that would be required for patient understanding and care management set of understanding, while still using sort of some of the core Dynamics functionality underneath. And so they've been able to use that. It's kind of a good example of some of that technology that we have built directly just to enhance our underlying service for more vertical capabilities, right? And so that's kind of a one example. Another one that I particularly like is the National Forest Foundation. One of our clouds, or sort of our industries, is nonprofit, and so with the Forest Foundation, we basically, as part of our solution, allow their employees to pretty much work from any of the 154 national forests, but as part of that, sort of enable them to coordinate their projects and track the donated dollars. And this is with a set of tools and capabilities built, integrated into Teams with Power Apps and so on, that allow them to basically build that and then even customize it to their needs. And so coming back a little bit to your question of like, hey, they came with a problem, this allowed them to sort of take our solutions pre-built, but then customized to their specific needs, but without them having to necessarily go through all of the rigmarole of the service list and which service makes the most sense for them, right? We basically hand it to them.
That's awesome.
Yep.
That's awesome. So why do you feel like now is the time, like all the cloud providers are essentially focusing on industry solutions? Like, why? Like, is there something with the timing? Is it just how it's evolving?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I think the primary reason, frankly, is just I do think the overall cloud market is shifting, right? I do think that is an element of what we're seeing, and especially when you look at sort of the full value of the Microsoft Cloud. One of the biggest sort of benefits that I think we have competitively is the full sort of left to right, from productivity to collaboration to business apps, low-code apps, all the way down to Azure Infinite Data. And with all of these services now available in the cloud and being used and consumed in the cloud, I think we're seeing this shift of looking at the cloud not just as an IT outlet, right? I think that's really the big shift, which is, by the way, IT outlet's fantastic, right? I love, as you know, my 10 years in infrastructure, right? Getting VMs up and running, getting them running for the lowest price possible, right? Like that was my gravy. That was it. That was all I did for 10 years. So like I loved it.
He's giving a nod to his peeps.
I know, right? Like you got to make sure that people are like, okay, yeah, he still loves that IT side, which I do. But we're seeing more and more of the businesses come up and say, and part of this is just the trends and the power that the cloud has with increased AI and ML, right? With increased sort of end-to-end business opportunity, like these these industry clouds are talking about. There's more business problems that can be solved, right? Where technology is actually taking a front seat to solving business problems versus being a backseat of just, get me my infrastructure when I need it or get me my network when I need it. Now it's, wow, here's all my data. What can I deduce from this? What can I learn? How can I operate in a better way or in a faster way? And so the business leaders of each of these industries are driving these questions and this push. And that's why I think you're seeing all the clouds and not even just the clouds, right? Pretty much every technology company responding in kind, right? And so I think there is a real shift in this need and this requirement. And a big part of that is also just the huge growth of data that is and data exhaust from some of these industry efforts, right, that you either are using and enhancing and advancing, or you're not and you're falling behind, right? And that's the sort of cold hard reality of what we're seeing across pretty much every industry. So I think it is a trend shift, and I think the technology is now there to be able to support the trend shift as we sort of continue to see these requirements shift.
So a couple of more questions. This is really interesting. So Microsoft is in a unique position because you pretty much have capabilities across, along the entire stack, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So on the one hand, this gives you a really nice rounded industry solution from top to bottom. On the other hand, that's going to be quite a challenge to be able to package and integrate those? Am I missing something? Or
No. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think that the only solace that I have is that it is a challenge, but it's harder when it's not all the same company. And so,
right.
like, I think that it is. Look, and there's just inherent differences in the way people expect to buy, right? When you look at something like productivity and collaboration, you expect to buy per person that's using it. When you're buying infrastructure, it's not per person using it. That would be silly, right? You're actually buying per core spinning, right? And so I think there's inherent differences there, just in customer expectations that make it challenging. And then certainly there's just components of the products are built with different goals in mind. And as we sort of bring some of these industry solutions, we're connecting the dots. It's actually one of the most exciting parts of my job, is sort of looking and saying, okay, great. Here is the scenario. How do I go get the right sort of solution from the Dynamics team and the Teams team and the infrastructure team and the data team to bring this all together and create something that is uniquely capable on the Microsoft cloud that no other competitor in the world can deliver upon. And it's fun, right? It's fun starting from that place, right? To sort of be like, wow, if I do this right, we stand alone, right? And so it's also, of course, a little bit, nerve-wracking, a little bit anxiety, because if I do it wrong, then they'll get someone who can do it right. So, but that's fine. I'm sure I'll go and move on to something else, and someone will ask me, well, what made you leave? And it's like, well, they asked me to. So anyway, but no, I do think it's really exciting, and the opportunity is so unique at Microsoft. I am really bullish on that.
So, I mean, I've got a million questions on industry solutions and cloud. I know you haven't been in the role for a long time, so I'd love to have you again where we really dig in on it. Like I said, you just opened up a can of worms in my mind, but I want to shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
So you're also responsible for global expansion. And one of the other things that I'm seeing a lot of these days is sovereign clouds. So my question to you is, what is a sovereign cloud? Like, how is a sovereign cloud different? Let's say, there's an Azure region in Germany or Paris or London. Is that a sovereign cloud by default? Will there be something different that will differentiate it?
Yeah. And so maybe I'll start by saying, the sort of umbrella term sovereign has become an incredibly complex concept, right? Worldwide, frankly. And I think the important thing, the critical thing, and by the way, I actually consider it very similar to the way we're approaching these industry conversations. So just as a sort of a little connecting point on sort of why one person owns both of these things. The spectrum of sort of what's required for sovereign is actually a spectrum of services and capabilities, right? And each customer, government or sort of local customer, will have different requirements based on what they're trying to get done, right? And so, like, every bank doesn't have the same set of requirements. Some are focusing really hard on their client side, and some are focusing really hard on their capital market side or what have you. And it's the same thing with sovereign, right? I think the biggest mistake we can make with sovereign is sort of saying it's one thing. It's not. It actually is a spectrum of capabilities, right? Starting from residency, right, with some of the announcements we've made, with EU data boundaries, sort of our residency efforts that are really focused on keeping customers' data within that country or that area, including things like confidential computing, right, which basically removes us from the trust chain with customers and partners, all the way to then hybrid solutions, right, that allow those solutions to run even disconnected from us, right, and sort of operate and deploy disconnected from us. And so, this range will be dictated by different types of workloads that fit into them. And I think one of the critical things that we think a lot about is how do we make sure we're supporting customers in the right way across that range, because it's complex, right? Coming back to your question about industry, it's like doubly complex here because you're like now down into the nitty-gritty features and cert requirements and replication requirements and so on. So I'm a strong believer that reliance on partners, again, sort of, again, maybe a theme for me and my team, reliance on partners is going to be key to our success. How do we go in and make sure that we are working with customers via the partners who understand them deeply, via the partners who deeply understand the rules, regulations, the requirements, but also understand the goals. What problems are they solving? Because just like any customer, government is looking to solve problems, right? And we got to go understand that and understand the best way that we can help them solve that. So I'm pretty excited about how we're approaching it, because I do think it gets value as quickly as possible and sort of takes it from the heated sort of 10,000 foot level down into, so what do you need, right? Like, how can I get you what you need? And that's maybe taking a little bit of my tech side and a little bit of my customer enablement side and jamming them together to work through some of this.
Okay, so sovereign cloud isn't going to be something separate, like kind of how there's government regions that are separate from the regular region. It's just the regular regions that get more support for regulatory compliance, whether it's government, healthcare, etc.
Yeah, and again, even just sort of leaning in on the range point, there will be examples of both, right? Is probably the best way to put it. And that's going to be based on, again, those customer requirements and the scenarios they're trying to solve. So, to me, solving sovereign is solving that customer's requirements. And sometimes it will push to a more isolated sort of deployment model, and sometimes it will push to a little bit more feature level conversation, and sometimes both, right? And so we're just going to have to continue to listen to our customers and work with our partners and find the right resolution across the board.
Very cool, very cool. So I want to shift you a little bit. So I know
how many shifts?
this one's going to be a little fun, and I'm not holding you to this. So I was personally super intrigued at Ignite when Satya talked about the metaverse, and again here completely casual conversation. I'm not going to hold you to it, but when you think of the metaverse, and I'm talking 3 to 5 years in Corey's mind, does that also have some kind of a connection to industry solutions, especially like manufacturing? I mean, that was really highlighted. And again, I'm not holding you to it here. I know it's still far out, but how do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, first I'll answer that question here by putting on my HoloLens. Just to make sure
there you go.
I'm always ready. Yeah, you didn't. I didn't even tell you I was going to do that. Now it's like I got you on a good laugh there. Yeah, no, look, I mean, here's the thing, when you look at almost every industry, the ability to model things before doing them is an awesome opportunity, right? Like, I mean, that's just like, because in almost all cases, doing that thing, whether it be building a plant, operating a plant, building a device, operating the plant, the line for that device, setting up a store, setting up the shelves in a store, right? Understanding the flow of people in that store, right? And so across manufacturing and retail and sustainability and all of these components, right? Being able to do a sort of virtual experience around it ahead of time saves money and allows you to run a whole bunch of analysis that is much harder to run once you're live and up and running, right? And so, you sort of mentioned manufacturing? The one of the best examples is digital twins, right? The ability to basically create a digital environment with either manufacturing plant. We've done things with like floors and buildings, working with partners out there to sort of model out, again, sort of store environments, right? With some virtual spaces, like the opportunity to be able to kind of do that visualization, run your models without laying a single brick of mortar, or I guess mortar. I guess mortars, I don't know if they come in bricks, but anyway, without doing any building, right? The ability to do that. And that to me is where I actually think the metaverse from a business perspective is going to be incredibly powerful. I think support as well. I love some of the capabilities that we offer with HoloLens and some of our sort of customer support capabilities, helping people in manufacturing plants. During COVID, this was critical for people to not have to travel, but still be able to guide what to fix and where to fix by seeing sort of the AR experience. But I think sort of the real scenarios are going to come in and sort of virtualize the environment. There's going to be a point in time where nothing is built without it first being fully virtualized in all sort of components and aspects across every single industry, whether an oil rig or a retail store.
And that's super powerful. I think the opportunity is going to be really interesting. The addition of virtual reality, augmented reality, I think those are going to be truly game changing. What didn't I ask you? Like in my mind right now, like I've got a million other questions and I'm looking at the time and I'm like, I can't keep them for much longer. So what didn't I ask you? Is there anything?
I will push you on one. Yeah. So because it's probably not one that you would think of as being an industry solution, because it actually is more of a horizontal. But I've mentioned a couple of times is sustainability. This is one that my team's also focusing on. We've been on this journey with Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. I think you've seen sort of the commitments Microsoft has made. Is awesome. Carbon negative by 2030, all carbon by 2050. The $1 billion climate fund, a bunch of focus on sort of our waste management and water management. But I love the products that we're working on here. And again, digital twins is actually, this is a great example of a product and sort of this virtualized metaverse environment will have fundamental changes on sustainability, right? Being able to model and design this and even someday may be required to get permits, right? We do some sustainability analysis in many governments today, but doing sort of a metaverse analysis, and then combining that in with some sort of, data, unifying the data around it, tracking all the different opportunities and being able to score it, right? And build markets around it. I mean, the sustainability's got such a big future. I'm really excited about it, and it is a big focus for us as well.
Hey, you brought this one onto yourself. You talked a lot about kind of Web 3.0. So I'm curious when the first Microsoft Azure for Industry NFT is going to be released.
I don't have enough computing power. They won't give it to me anymore. And the infrastructure team, they're like, you're gone. So I don't have the computing power to be able to run it. But I'm still trying. So
Corey, how many NFTs have you purchased? Be honest now.
I've not. I will be honest. I've not purchased one, but if you've got guidance, you've got recommendations, let me know.
Well, there's a lot of these NFTs now that are, comic books. There's some cool things happening.
Okay.
I don't know how realistic it is, but NFTs to me, I think they'll eventually find some kind of a use case. On one of the episodes of the podcast, we talked to someone that focuses on crypto, and he brought up a really interesting use case around identification and using NFTs as a form of ID, kind of like the COVID passports instead of.
Interesting.
So I'm sure it'll settle on something that's more useful than what we're seeing today.
There's a lot of opportunity for the technology, right? Just broadly speaking, right? Blockchain technology, a lot of opportunity. But sometimes the hardest thing is finding all the perfect places to use it. And I think that's just work that industries are all doing this, right? And I think I'm excited about where some parts of this are going.
Yeah. And again, just selfishly, you're going to need teams that can talk across all of these different solutions, or are you just going to create virtual teams? I'm curious. You're touching pretty much everything, every aspect.
Yeah. I think we're going to have a little bit of both, right? I think that I do have teams, and I've segmented my team by industry, but I'm trying to keep. This is the sort of age-old adage at Microsoft, is that big teams find solutions to build, and so I'm trying to keep my team as thin and efficient and nimble as possible, because I think the place where I could really mess up, just candidly, is trying to build too much verticalization and not remembering my roots in the horizontal platforms, right? And this is where, if I go, because again, it comes back to the humility point. If I go out and say, I'm going to go build, a health experience built on Teams that all doctors are going to go use, right? It's like, doctors are going to be like, but everyone uses this Teladoc thing or this Epic thing. Why would I buy that from Microsoft? Yeah, exactly. You guys have never worked with doctors before. Why do you guys know anything about this, right? And so there's this humility point that we just have to continue, because as engineers, we're like, let's just go solve all these problems. But we got to keep it clamped down to what are we good at and what are we not good at? And let's not go try and do things we're not good at.
I like the partner approach. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with pricing when you're integrating all of these solutions. So that's going to be fun. But
so I have business model people. That's right. I just I stay away from that.
Like I said, I could ask you 1,000,001 questions. I want to thank you so much for making time to be on the show. love to have you again in 6 or 7 months when we can talk a little bit about more of the things that you're doing and some of the advancements that you're doing. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Appreciate it. Looking forward to coming back.
Take care now.